The purple sky of Zarian 7 stretched endlessly above the dig site, where Dr. Zara worked carefully with her brush, removing centuries of crystal dust from what looked like metal. She had been digging here for 3 months, and today felt different. Today, she might finally uncover the mystery that had puzzled her people for generations. "Professor Zara, look at this," called out her assistant, pointing to a smooth, curved surface that was definitely not natural rock. The metal gleamed with an unusual silver color that seemed to shift in the light. Zara's heart raced. This was it, the legendary craft of the first builders. The ancient ones who had vanished without a trace 10,000 years ago, stories said. They could travel between stars like her. People traveled between cities. But those were just old tales, weren't they? For weeks, her team had been carefully digging around the massive object. It was huge, bigger than any building in their capital city. The more they uncovered, the more beautiful it became. Strange symbols covered its surface, symbols that seemed to glow faintly when touched by sunlight. "Be very careful," Zara told her team. "This could change everything we know about our world." They had tried everything to understand the craft. The best scientists came from across their planet. They brought machines that could see through solid metal. They brought computers that could solve the most difficult puzzles. But nothing worked. The craft remained silent, like it was sleeping. Zara spent her nights studying the ancient texts, looking for any clue about how the first builders had made their ships work. Some stories mentioned that the pilots had to connect their minds to the ship somehow. But no one alive knew how to do that. The morning everything changed started like any other. Zara was drinking her morning tea when she heard a strange sound in the sky. Looking up, she saw a streak of fire falling toward the horizon. A ship was crashing. "Emergency team, move out." They had vehicles for rescue situations, and they raced across the rocky ground toward the smoke rising in the distance. What they found was unlike anything they had ever seen. The crashed ship was clearly from another world, but it was different from the ancient craft they were studying. This one was newer, made with different materials, and it was still warm. From its journey through space, inside, they found him a being that looked surprisingly like them, but with subtle differences. His skin was a different shade, his hair was different, and his clothes were made from materials they didn't recognize. But he was alive, just unconscious. "He's from the Star Travelers," whispered one of her team members. They had heard stories of other worlds, other peoples who lived among the stars, but they had never met one. Zara made a decision that would change everything. Bring him to the dig site. Our medical tent is there, and we can help him recover. They carefully moved the stranger to their camp. While their medic worked to help him, Zara studied his crashed ship. The technology was advanced, but worked in ways she could understand. Unlike the ancient craft, this ship used familiar principles of engineering. The stranger woke up slowly. When he opened his eyes, he looked around with confusion and maybe a little fear. Zara approached him carefully. "Hello," she said in the universal language that star travelers used. "I am Zara. You crashed on our world. You are safe now." The stranger sat up slowly, holding his head. "I'm David," he said, his voice rough from his ordeal. "My navigation system failed. I don't know where I am." "You're on Zarian 7, Zara explained. "My team found you. How do you feel?" David looked around the camp, taking in the purple sky, the crystal formations, and the alien but friendly faces surrounding him. "Better, thanks to you." "What is this place?" Zara couldn't help but smile. "This is an archaeological dig. We're studying something very old and very mysterious." David recovered over the next few days. Zara found herself fascinated by his stories of traveling between worlds. He told her about his home planet, about the vast network of civilizations that existed among the stars, and about the great mysteries that still waited to be discovered. "Would you like to see what we found?" Zara asked him on his third day. At the camp, David nodded eagerly. He'd been curious about the large tent that covered something in the center of the dig site. When Zara pulled back the protective covering, David stopped breathing for a moment. The ancient craft was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Its surface seemed to flow like liquid metal, and the symbols carved into it appeared to move. When he wasn't looking directly at them, "This is incredible," he whispered. "How old did you say it was?" 10,000 years, maybe more, Zara replied. We call them the first builders. They vanished completely, leaving only stories in this ship. David walked closer to the craft, drawn by something he couldn't explain. There was something familiar about it, though he had never seen anything like it before. His hand reached out almost on its own. Wait, Zara called out. We don't know if it's safe to touch, but David's hand was already moving toward the surface. The moment his fingers made contact with the strange metal, everything changed. The craft came alive. Light poured from the symbols, creating patterns that danced across the dig site. A low humming sound filled the air, growing stronger by the second. The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate gently. Zara and her team stepped back in amazement and fear. They had studied this craft for months, tried everything they could think of, and nothing had happened. Now this stranger from another world had simply touched it, and it was responding like it recognized him. How did you do that? Zara asked. Her voice filled with wonder. David stared at his hand, then at the glowing craft. I don't know. It felt like I was supposed to touch it, like it was calling to me. The lights on the craft pulsed in rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Ancient systems that had been dormant for millennia were waking up. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing star maps and symbols that meant nothing to Zara, but seemed to make perfect sense to David. This is impossible, one of Zara's assistants said. Our greatest pilots couldn't activate this ship. But there it was, humming with power and light, responding to a stranger who had literally fallen from the sky. Zara looked at David with new eyes. Who was this traveler, and why could he do what no one else could? The ancient craft had been waiting for 10,000 years. Waiting for someone who could understand its language, someone who could wake it from its long sleep. And now David was standing there, his hands still on the surface of the ship, with no idea that he had just changed the course of history for 2 entire worlds. The mystery was just beginning to unfold, and Zara knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The first builders had left them a gift, and somehow this human pilot was the key to unlocking it. As the sun set over Zarian 7, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, the ancient craft continued to hum with life, ready to reveal secrets that had been hidden for millennia. The next morning, Zara could barely contain her excitement. She had spent the entire night thinking about what had happened. David, this human pilot from another world, had done something that should have been impossible. The ancient craft was still glowing softly, as if it was waiting for him to return. We need to understand how this works, Zara told her team as they gathered around the breakfast table. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. Her assistant, Keto, looked worried. Should we contact the authorities? They might want to study this themselves? Zara nodded. I already sent a message to the Research Council. They're sending their best scientists here today. When David joined them for breakfast, he looked different, more alert, more focused. He kept glancing toward the covered craft, like he could sense it even through the protective tent. Did you sleep well? Zara asked him. David shook his head. I kept having strange dreams. It's like I was flying through space, but not in my ship. And something much older, much more powerful. Dreams about the craft? Zara's eyes widened with interest. Maybe. It's hard to explain. I felt like I was remembering something, but I've never seen anything like your ship before. Within hours, the dig site was buzzing with activity. Scientists arrived from the capital city, bringing advanced equipment that Zara had only heard about in research papers. Dr. Vox, the head of the Research Council, was a stern woman who didn't believe in mysteries. Show me what happened, she demanded. Zara led the group to the ancient craft. Even in daylight, it was still beautiful, still humming with quiet energy. The symbols on its surface seemed to pulse with a rhythm all their own. David, would you mind touching it again? Zara asked. David approached the craft slowly. The moment his hand came near the surface, the ship responded. The humming grew louder, the lights brighter, but this time, something new happened. Holographic displays appeared in the air around the craft, showing images that made everyone gasp. Star maps. Hundreds of them. The displays showed the galaxy as it had been 10,000 years ago, with glowing lines connecting dozens of worlds. David stared at the images, and somehow he understood them. These are navigation charts, he said, his voice filled with wonder. This system here, that's my home region of space. And this one, I think that's where we are now. Dr. Vox stepped forward, her skepticism melting away. How can you read these? Our best linguists have studied these symbols for years. David shook his head. I don't know, I just understand them, reading a language I've always known but forgot I knew. As David continued to interact with the craft, more systems came online. The ship's memory banks began to reveal their secrets. Ancient recordings started playing, showing images of the first builders for the first time in millennia. Zara watched the holographic figures with amazement. They looked almost exactly like David. The same general body shape, the same facial features, even similar clothing styles. But that was impossible, wasn't it? David, she said quietly, look at them, really look. David studied the holographic people, and his face went pale. They looked like humans, like my people. Dr. Vox was recording everything, her instruments working overtime to capture the flood of information. This is unprecedented. We're seeing actual historical records from the first builders, recordings showed. Cities on distant worlds, great ships traveling between stars, and advanced technology that made even David's civilization look primitive. But then the images changed. They showed fear, evacuation, and abandonment. Something happened to them, David said, his hands still on the craft's surface. Something that made them leave in a hurry. More data flowed from the ship's memory. Star charts showing evacuation routes, lists of abandoned colonies, and references to something called the Great Silence, a catastrophic event that had forced the first builders to abandon their vast interstellar civilization. Wait, Zara said, studying one of the holographic displays. This world? This is Zarian 7, our planet. It's marked as one of their colony worlds. The implications hit everyone at the same time. Zarian 7 wasn't just a world the first builders had visited. It was a world they had lived on. The very ground they stood on had once been home to David's ancestors. So that's why I can operate this ship, David said slowly. People, the humans, we were here before. We built this. Dr. Vox was frantically taking notes. This changes everything we know about our planet's history. We thought we were the first intelligent species to evolve here. Zara felt a mix of excitement and confusion. But if humans lived here 10,000 years ago, what happened to them? And why didn't we know about this? The ship's systems seemed to respond to her question. New displays appeared, showing geological data and environmental readings. The story they told was both fascinating and tragic. There was a plague, David said, interpreting the data somehow. Not a biological one, but something that affected the connection between minds and technology. The first builders had to choose between staying and losing their ability to use their advanced tools or leaving to find a cure. They chose to leave, Zara whispered. But not all of them, David continued, his eyes wide with realization. Some stayed behind, hoping to find another way, wade into deep sleep, waiting for their descendants to return. The holographic displays showed locations across Zarian 7, underground facilities, hidden bases, places where the first builders had left behind not just technology, but people. Sleeping people, waiting for someone who could wake them up. There are others, David said. Humans who never left. They're still here, still sleeping, still waiting. Dr. Vox looked up from her instruments. The energy readings from those locations. They're active. After 10,000 years, they're still functioning. Zara felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. Her people had been living on a world that was actually a vast tomb, filled with sleeping humans who had been waiting for rescue for millennia. We have to tell people, she said. The whole planet needs to know. But David looked worried. What if waking them up is dangerous? What if whatever made the first builders leave is still out there? The ship's systems pulsed, almost like it was agreeing with his concern. New warnings appeared on the displays, showing distant threats and ancient enemies that might still be searching for first builder technology. We need to be careful, Zara said. But we also can't just leave them sleeping forever. As the day wore on, more scientists arrived. Each new discovery raised more questions. The ship's databases contained information about dozens of worlds, advanced technologies, and hints about the plague that had driven the first builders away. David found himself at the center of it all. Only he could fully interact with the ship's systems. So only he could read the ancient records. So only he could understand the navigation charts that showed the way to other first builder worlds. "This is just the beginning," he told Zara as they watched the sun set over the dig site. "There are probably ships like this on other worlds waiting for someone like me to wake them up." Zara nodded, but she was thinking about the sleeping humans hidden beneath their planet's surface. Tomorrow, they would have to decide what to do with this incredible discovery. They would have to choose between the safety of ignorance and the dangerous path of knowledge. The ancient craft hummed quietly in the growing darkness, its systems finally awake after 10,000 years of silence. And somewhere beneath the surface of Zarian 7, other systems were beginning to stir, responding to signals they had been waiting eons to receive. The first builders were gone, but their legacy was very much alive. And David, the human pilot who had crashed on their world by accident, was about to become the key to unlocking secrets that would change the fate of entire civilizations. 3 days had passed since the revelation about the sleeping humans, and David couldn't get the thought out of his mind. The research team had been studying the data from the ancient craft, but they were moving so slowly. Every hour that passed meant another hour that those people remained trapped in their endless sleep. "We need to see those locations for ourselves," David told Zara as they stood beside the humming ship. "The craft's sensors could help us understand what's down there." Zara looked around nervously. Dr. Vox and the other scientists were in their temporary lab, analyzing the data they had collected. They had made it clear that no one was to touch the ship without proper authorization. The council said, "We have to wait for their decision," Zara reminded him. "They want to study everything before we take any action." David shook his head. "Those people have been waiting for 10,000 years. How much longer should they wait while we fill out paperwork?" The ship seemed to pulse with agreement, its lights growing brighter as if it could sense David's frustration. Over the past few days, his connection with the craft had grown stronger. He could feel its systems, almost like they were part of him. "I know you want to help them," Zara said quietly. "But what if something goes wrong? What if flying the ship triggers some kind of defense system? Then we'll deal with it," David replied. "But we can't help anyone by standing here doing nothing." Zara studied his face. I had come to know David well over the past week, and she could see the determination in his eyes. He wasn't going to wait much longer. "If we're going to do this," she said finally, "we do it now, while the others are busy in the lab." David's face lit up with relief. "You'll come with me?" "Someone needs to make sure you don't get us both killed," Zara said with a nervous smile. They approached the ship together. The moment David placed his hand on the surface, the craft responded like it had been waiting for this moment. A section of the hull slid open silently, revealing an entrance that glowed with soft blue light. "I can't believe I'm doing this," Zara whispered as they stepped inside. The interior of the ship was breathtaking. The walls seemed to be made of flowing metal that changed color as they moved. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing information that David somehow understood instinctively. "The pilot's area is this way," he said, leading her toward the front of the ship. The cockpit was unlike anything either of them had ever seen. Instead of traditional controls, there were crystal formations that pulsed with energy. As David sat in the pilot's seat, the crystals began to glow, and he felt the ship's systems connecting with his mind. "This is incredible," he breathed. "I can feel the ship's sensors, its engines, even its memory banks. It's like we're becoming one being." Zara strapped herself into the seat beside him, her heart racing with excitement and fear. "Are you sure? You know how to fly this thing?" David's hands moved over the crystal controls, and the ship responded smoothly. "I don't know how, but yes, it feels as natural as breathing." The ancient craft lifted off from the dig site with perfect grace. There was no vibration, no sound of engines roaring to life. It simply rose into the purple sky of Zarian 7 like it was floating on air. "Look," Zara pointed to the displays around them. "The ship is scanning the planet automatically." David nodded, his eyes closed as he felt the craft's sensors sweep across. "The surface below?" It's finding them, the sleeping chambers. There are dozens of them, all across the planet. As they flew higher, the ship's displays showed a map of Zarian 7 that neither of them had ever seen before. Hidden beneath the surface were vast underground complexes, connected by tunnels that ran for hundreds of miles. My people built all of this, David said in wonder. They turned your entire planet into a refuge. But as they flew toward the first marked location, something unexpected happened. Ancient towers began rising from the ground, their surfaces gleaming with the same technology as the ship. They had been hidden for millennia, waiting for the right signal to activate. What are those? Zara asked, pointing to the towers. David's connection with the ship gave him the answer. Defense systems. They're designed to protect the sleeping chambers from intruders. The towers began to emit energy beams, scanning the ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then alarms began sounding throughout the craft. They don't recognize us, David said, his voice tight with concern. The ship's identification codes are too old. The defense systems think we're a threat. More towers emerged from the ground, forming a defensive grid around the underground complex. Energy weapons that had been dormant for 10,000 years began powering up their targeting systems. Locking onto the ancient ship. Can you shut them down? Zara asked, gripping her seat as the ship shook from a near miss. I'm trying, David replied, his hands flying over the crystal controls. But the ship's systems are so old, and the defenses have been upgraded over the centuries. The craft dove and weaved through the air as automated defense drones launched from hidden bases. David's piloting skills were being pushed to their limits, but somehow he managed to stay ahead of the pursuing weapons. There, he said, pointing to a gap in the defense grid. If I can get us through there, we can reach the complex entrance. As they approached the gap, it began to close. Defense systems were learning, adapting to David's flying patterns. What had started as a simple reconnaissance mission was becoming a deadly game of cat and mouse. The ship's memory banks, Zara said suddenly. Can you access the override codes? David nodded, diving deep into the craft's ancient databases while simultaneously piloting through a storm of energy beams. The ship responded to his dual focus, its systems working at incredible speed. Got it, he said, and transmitted the ancient codes to the defense grid. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the weapons powered down. The drones returned to their bases, and the towers sank back into the ground. The underground complex was opening its doors for the first time in 10,000 years. We did it, Zara breathed, but their celebration was short-lived. As the ship descended toward the complex entrance, new alarms began sounding. Not from the defenses this time, but from the ship itself. What's wrong? Zara asked. David studied the displays, his face growing pale. The activation signal. When we used the override codes, we sent a message across the galaxy. Other First Builder sites are waking up, but so are other things. What kind of other things? The enemies my people were running from. They've been searching for First Builder technology for 10,000 years, and we just told them exactly where to find it. As they landed beside the complex entrance, David realized they had solved one problem but created a much bigger one. The sleeping humans could finally be awakened, but doing so had sent a beacon across the galaxy. That would attract forces far more dangerous than any automated defense system. The ship scanners were already detecting movement in distant star systems. Ships were turning towards Zarian 7, their crews drawn by the signal like hunters following a scent. How long do we have? Zara asked. David checked the displays. Maybe a few days. A week at most. They stepped out of the ship and stood before the entrance to the underground complex. Somewhere beneath their feet, thousands of humans were sleeping, waiting to be awakened. But waking them up might have doomed both their species to a war they weren't prepared to fight. We have to warn everyone, Zara said. David nodded, but he was looking at the complex entrance with determination, and we have to wake them up. They might be the only ones who know how to stop what's coming. The ancient ship hummed behind them, its systems still connected to David's mind. It was ready for whatever came next, and so was he. The flight had been successful, but it had also changed everything. Now they were racing against time to prevent a catastrophe that could destroy civilizations across the galaxy. The entrance to the underground complex was massive, carved from solid rock and lined with the same flowing metal as the ship. As David and Zara stepped through the doorway, lights began flickering on automatically, illuminating a corridor that stretched far into the darkness. "It's been waiting for us," David said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "The whole complex is waking up." Their footsteps echoed as they walked deeper into the facility. The walls were covered with more of the strange symbols they had seen on the ship, but these were different somehow. More complex, more urgent. "What do they say?" Zara asked, pointing to a series of symbols that seemed to glow brighter as they approached. David studied them, his connection to the ancient technology allowing him to understand their meaning. Their warnings, instructions, and ... coordinates to other facilities like this one. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that took their breath away. The ceiling stretched up so high they couldn't see the top, and the walls were lined with thousands of crystal cylinders. Each one was filled with a soft blue light, and inside each one, David could see the silhouette of a sleeping human. "There are so many of them," Zara whispered. David approached one of the cylinders, his heart racing. The person inside looked exactly like humans from his world, but their clothes were different, more advanced. A small display beside the cylinder showed vital signs that had been steady for 10,000 years. "They're all alive," he said in amazement. "After all this time, they're still alive." As they moved deeper into the chamber, more lights came on. The center of the room stood a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with energy. It was clearly some kind of control system, but it was far more complex than anything on the ship. "The central AI," David said, understanding flooding through him. "It's been maintaining all of this, keeping them alive, waiting for someone who could wake them up." The crystal structure began to glow brighter as they approached. Suddenly, a holographic figure appeared in front of them. It was an elderly, human woman, her image flickering slightly after so many years. "Welcome," the hologram said, her voice warm but tired. "I am Alara, the guardian of this facility. I have been waiting so long for someone like you to arrive." David stepped forward. "I'm David. I'm human like them. I can operate the old technology." Lara's holographic face showed relief and joy. "Yes, I can sense it. You carry the genetic markers we've been waiting for. The immunity to the plague." "That drove us here, plague?" Zara asked. "We heard about it from the ship's records, but we don't understand what it was." The hologram turned to face her. "It wasn't a biological plague. It was something that attacked the connection between organic minds and our technology. Our ships, our computers, even our medical systems, they all became dangerous to use." "But David can use them safely," Zara observed. "Yes," Ilara nodded. "Humans who remained on the original worlds developed resistance over the generations. But we who came here, we were vulnerable. We had to choose between abandoning our technology or going to sleep until our descendants could return." David looked around at the thousands of sleeping people. How many chose to sleep? Almost everyone. A few stayed awake to maintain the systems, but they eventually passed away. "I am the last of the Guardians, and I exist only as a digital consciousness." Now, the weight of responsibility settled on David's shoulders. These people had been waiting for him, or someone like him, for 10,000 years. Their entire civilization had bet everything on the hope that their descendants would one day return. "Can we wake them up?" David asked. Lara's expression grew. "Serious. We can, but there are risks. The awakening process is delicate, and it must be done slowly. More importantly, there are enemies who have been searching for us. Our sensors detect ships approaching this system." "Kethlari," David said, the name coming to him from the ship's memories. "They're still out there." "Yes. They were the ones who created the plague, hoping to steal our technology once we could no longer use it. They've been searching for facilities like this one ever since." Zara felt a chill run down her spine. "How long before they arrive?" "Perhaps 5 days," Alara replied. "Maybe less. But awakening even a small number of our people will take at least that long." David made a decision. Then we start now. How many can we wake up first? Ilara led them to a control panel that appeared from the floor. The military commanders and engineers should be awakened first. They'll know how to prepare our defenses. As David placed his hands on the controls, information flooded into his mind. The awakening process was incredibly complex, requiring precise timing and careful monitoring of each person's vital signs. But somehow he understood it all. Beginning. Awakening sequence for Section A, he announced. Around them, 50 of the crystal cylinders began to glow brighter. The people inside began to stir for the first time in millennia. David watched the displays carefully, adjusting the process as needed. "You're doing well," Ilara said. "Better than I hoped. Your connection to our technology is stronger than any of the original colonists." Hours passed as they worked to wake the first group. Zara helped by monitoring the displays and alerting David to any problems. Finally, the first cylinder opened with a soft hiss. A middle-aged man stepped out, looking confused but alert, wearing the uniform of a military officer, and his eyes quickly assessed the situation. "Commander Torres," Ilara said. "He's David. He's the one we've been waiting for." Torres looked at David with amazement. "You're from Earth? From the homeworlds?" "Not Earth exactly," David explained. "But yes, I'm human. We have a problem. The Kethlari are coming." Torres's expression immediately became serious. "How long? Maybe 5 days? Then we need to wake the engineers immediately." Weapons specialists. Torres turned to study the vast chamber. "How many facilities like this are there?" "Dozens," Ilara replied. "All across this planet and others? But this one is the largest, and it contains our most advanced technology." More cylinders opened, and soon the chamber was filled with people who had been asleep for 10,000 years. They moved with purpose, their training and experience intact despite their long sleep. "The orbital defense grid," one of the engineers said. "Is it still functional?" "Partially," Ilara replied. "But it will need David's help to reach full operation." As the newly awakened humans began to organize, David realized that his role was changing. He wasn't just the person who could operate their technology, he was becoming the bridge between the ancient civilization and the modern galaxy. "There's something else," Torres said, studying the tactical displays. "The Kethlari aren't just coming for us, they're coming for the ship." For David, they know that whoever can operate First Builder technology could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. Zara looked at David with concern. "They're coming for you." David nodded grimly. "Then we'd better make sure they don't get what they're looking for." The awakening process continued through the night. With each person who emerged from their crystal sleep, the facility became more alive, more ready for the battle that was coming. But David knew that waking up a few hundred people wouldn't be enough to stop an entire Kethlari fleet. They needed something more, something that had been sleeping even longer than the people around them. The ship's memory banks mentioned other vessels, David said to Ilara. "Bigger ones. Warships." Ilara's holographic face showed both hope and fear. "The deep storage hangars. Yes, they exist. But those ships are far more powerful than anything." "You've operated before? Can I handle them?" "I don't know. The connection required is much more intense. It could be dangerous." David looked around at the faces of the people who had trusted him with their lives. "We have to try. It's the only way to protect everyone." As dawn approached on the surface, the underground facility hummed with activity. The first group of awakened humans was preparing defenses, while David prepared to attempt something that no one had done for 10,000 years. The fate of two civilizations now rested on his ability to connect with technology that was older than recorded history. And somewhere in the darkness of space, enemy ships were drawing closer with each passing hour. The deep storage hangar was unlike anything David had ever seen. It stretched for miles underground, filled with ships that seemed to be made of living metal. These weren't just vehicles, they were works of art, each one unique and beautiful. In its own way, the war fleet of the First Builders, Commander Torres said with reverence. "I never thought I'd see them again." The largest ship sat in the center of the hangar, its hull gleaming with patterns that seemed to shift and move. It was easily 10 times the size of the scout ship that had started this whole adventure. "That's the Starfire," Alara explained, her holographic form flickering with excitement. "It was the flagship of our defense fleet." But David, connecting with something that powerful, it's never been done by someone from the outside worlds. David approached the massive ship, feeling its presence like a living thing. The moment he got close, the vessel began to respond. Lights traced along its hull, and a deep humming sound filled the hangar. "It recognizes you," Torres said in amazement. After all these years, it's still waiting for a pilot. But their wonder was interrupted by urgent alarms. Zara rushed over to them, her face pale with worry. "The Kethlari fleet just entered the system," she announced. 50 ships, maybe more. They'll be here in 6 hours. David felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He could try to pilot the Starfire, but if he failed, everyone would be defenseless. Or he could take the smaller ship and try to lead the enemy away from the planet. "How many people have we awakened?" he asked Torres. "About 300 so far. Not nearly enough to crew all these ships, but enough to operate the planetary defenses." David looked at the faces around him. These people had trusted him with their lives, and now he had to choose how to protect them. The Starfire could probably defeat the entire Kethlari fleet, but only if he could successfully connect with its systems. "I have to try," he said finally. "It's our only chance." The entry ramp of the Starfire lowered as David approached. The interior was breathtaking, walls of flowing crystal and metal that pulsed with energy. The command chamber was enormous, with a pilot seat that seemed to be made of pure light. "The connection is much deeper than anything you've experienced," Alara warned him. "You'll be linked not just to the ship, but to the entire network of First Builder technology across the galaxy." David sat in the pilot's seat and immediately felt the difference. The ship's consciousness was vast and ancient, filled with memories of battles fought across the stars. For a moment, he was overwhelmed by the flood of information. "I can feel them," he said, his voice distant. "All the other ships, all the other facilities, they're all connected, all waiting." Zara stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone. We're all here with you." David closed his eyes and opened his mind to the ship's systems. The connection was unlike anything he had experienced before. He could feel the ship's weapons, its shields, its ability to travel faster than light. But more than that, he could feel its purpose to protect the people who had built it. "Kethlari ships are entering the atmosphere," Torres announced from the command center. "They're targeting the facility." The Starfire lifted off from the hangar with impossible grace. David felt like he was the ship, soaring through the underground tunnels and up into the purple sky of Zarian 7. The enemy fleet was spread across the horizon, their dark ships bristling with weapons. "This is Commander Vex of the Kethlari Empire." A voice crackled over the communication system. "Surrender the human pilot and the First Builder technology, and we will spare your world." David opened a channel to respond. "This is David. If you want this technology, you'll have to come and take it." The battle began instantly. The Kethlari ships opened fire, their weapons lighting up the sky. But the Starfire was faster and more maneuverable than anything they had. David weaved between the enemy vessels, his connection to the ship allowing him to anticipate their moves. The ship's weapons were beyond anything David had imagined. Energy beams that could slice through enemy hulls, shields that could deflect any attack, and the ability to appear and disappear at will. But the Kethlari had numbers on their side. "More ships are arriving," Torres reported. "They brought reinforcements." David realized he was fighting not just for Zarian 7, but for the future of human civilization. If the Kethlari got their hands on First Builder technology, they would use it to conquer the galaxy. "Alara," he called out, "can you wake up the other ships?" "Not without more pilots," she replied. "If there's another way. You can use the network to contact other First Builder facilities. Wake up their guardians." David opened his mind further, feeling the connection spread across the galaxy. One by one, other facilities began to respond. Data ships that had been dormant for millennia started to power up. Ancient defense systems came online on dozens of worlds. "What have you done?" Commander Vex demanded, as his sensors detected the massive Network activation. I've given my people their ships back, David replied. The battle turned in their favor as reinforcements began arriving from across the galaxy. But David knew this was just the beginning. The Kethlari would return with larger fleets, and other enemies would come seeking First Builder technology. We need to be ready, he told the others, as the last enemy ship fled the system. This isn't over. In the days that followed, more humans were awakened from their long sleep. The underground cities came alive with activity as people who had been frozen in time began to rebuild their civilization. They weren't alone. Zara's people, the Zirians, joined them as partners in this new age. You did something incredible, Zara told David, as they stood together watching the sunset. You brought two worlds together. David nodded, but he was thinking about the future. There are more facilities out there, more sleeping people waiting to be awakened, and more enemies who will try to stop us. Then we'll face them together, Zara said. Humans and Zirians, working side by side. The ancient ship that had started it all sat nearby, its systems humming quietly. It had been waiting for 10,000 years for someone who could understand its purpose. Now it had found not just a pilot, but a bridge between civilizations. David looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, other First Builder facilities were waking up. The network was growing stronger, and with it, the hope for a peaceful galaxy. But he also knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The Kethlari would return. Other enemies would emerge, and David would have to choose again and again whether to risk everything to protect the people who had come to depend on him. But for now, on this purple world under alien stars, two civilizations were learning to work together. The First Builders had left them more than just technology, they had left them hope. And with David as their bridge between past and future, that hope was finally becoming reality. The ancient ships hummed with power, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. And somewhere in the vast network of connected facilities, more sleeping humans were beginning to stir, ready to reclaim their place among the stars. The story of the alien girl, who was stunned by the human pilot's abilities, had become something much greater. The story of how two worlds found each other and chose to face the future together.